A history with missing pages. When we think of the United States, we imagine a young nation, a country founded barely 2.5 centuries ago. We imagine pioneers, wooden cabins, dirt streets, and hastily built towns slowly transforming into the modern cities we know today. But what if that story is incomplete? What if the timeline we were taught in school, the idea that America was once an untouched wilderness with no advanced structures, was only half the truth? Because beneath the streets of major U.S. cities, beneath layers of asphalt, concrete, and history, researchers and explorers are finding something astonishing. Ruins, tunnels, old foundations, buried windows, stone arches, and sometimes entire levels of forgotten cities, structures that appear far older than the official history suggests. Today, we open a door that many historians prefer to keep shut, a door into a version of American history that challenges everything we think we know. Why do old American cities look too advanced? If you walk through historic districts of San Francisco, New York, Chicago, Boston, Philadelphia, or Baltimore, you'll notice something strange. The architecture doesn't match the time period. Massive stone buildings with domes, pillars, arches, and fine carved details, all supposedly constructed in the late 1800s by frontier settlers who had barely mastered basic engineering. But here's the problem. These structures look like they belong in ancient Rome, not 19th century America. For example, San Francisco City Hall, officially dated to the early 1900s, features an enormous neoclassical dome more complex than structures built in Europe at the same time. Yet the workers in photographs look suspiciously like they are repairing an existing structure, not building one from scratch. The same thing applies to the Chicago Water Tower, Old Pennsylvania Station, Cincinnati's Music Hall, Boston Public Library, the Treasury Building in Washington, D.C. Buildings too perfect, too massive, too expertly engineered for the era they were supposedly built in. According to textbooks, the U.S. in the mid-1800s was still a rugged, developing country. Yet somehow its cities exploded with architecture equal to or better than the Old World. Something doesn't add up. The underground cities. What's beneath our feet? One of the most compelling mysteries in America is what lies beneath the pavement, because many cities in the U.S. sit on top of older versions of themselves. Seattle Underground. After the Great Fire of 1889, the city was rebuilt one level higher. Today, the Seattle Underground is open for tours. But here's the mystery. The old underground sidewalks, storefronts, and streets seem too well made, too cleanly designed, and too large to be the simple wooden frontier town that supposedly burned down. The stone arches, the carved masonry, the sophisticated drainage systems, they seem older, much older. Portland's Shanghai Tunnels. Beneath Portland is a vast network of tunnels that even the city government admits are older than any official records. No one knows who built them. New York's hidden levels. Under Manhattan, explorers have found blocked-off staircases, massive bricked archways, and foundations deeper than any 19th century construction techniques can explain. Even the old Croton Aqueduct, built in the early 1440s, is so advanced that modern engineers still marvel at how such a young country built something so complex. Chicago's double-level city. Chicago famously has two layers, upper and lower levels.
But beneath those survives evidence of a third, even older layer. Buried windows, half-buried doorways, foundations that predate the Great Chicago Fire. Why? Why did so many American cities need to be razed? Or is it possible that something happened which buried the old cities?
The mud flood theory. One of the most controversial ideas circulating among researchers and alternative historians today is known as the mud flood theory. The theory suggests that in the 1700s or early 1800s, a massive unexplained event caused cities worldwide to be suddenly buried under many feet of mud and sediment. Whether the cause was a natural disaster, a shift in the Earth's crust, a volcanic ash event, or something entirely unknown, no one knows. But what they do know is this. Thousands of old photos from the 1800s show half-buried buildings. Literally, windows at ground level, doors that open into dirt, basements that are clearly not built as basements. These photos exist from Denver, New York, San Francisco, St. Louis, Atlanta, Chicago, Baltimore, Philadelphia. Why would a newly built city bury its own buildings? Unless they were there before the settlers arrived. The phenomenon of orphaned architecture. Across the United States, there are thousands of monumental structures labeled by historians as mysteries, oddities, or anomalies. For example, 1. The Lemp Brewery Caverns in St. Louis. Massive underground stone chambers with arches resembling medieval structures. 2. The old Louisiana State Capitol, a Gothic castle complete with towers and battlements supposedly built in 1847, in a region where the population was tiny and construction skills limited. 3. Fort Jefferson in the Dry Tortugas, a gigantic brick fortress built on a remote island. Historians say workers brought 16 million bricks by ship. But how? Why? And who financed it? 4. The Ohio State House, completed in 1861, yet it closely resembles a Roman temple. Why does early American architecture look more ancient than Europe's? Why does the style appear out of place for frontier America? Unless the frontier wasn't as empty as we were told. Photographic problems. Where are the workers? When we see old photographs of these massive buildings being constructed, one thing becomes obvious. There are almost no construction crews. No cranes, no machinery, no scaffolding, no mess. Often the buildings look complete, with workers merely posing in front for staged photos. In some images, the workers are clearly repairing or cleaning, not constructing. If these buildings were truly built from scratch in the late 1800s, where are the early photos of the foundation being laid? Where are the blueprints? Where is the record of materials and labor? How did small towns with tiny populations build massive stone structures requiring thousands of skilled craftsmen? The silence is deafening. Who built the old-world American structures? If the buildings weren't constructed in the 1800s, then who built them? There are several theories. Theory 1. A lost North American civilization. Perhaps there was once a civilization capable of advanced stone architecture long before Europeans arrived. Evidence? The mysterious mound builders. The lost city of Cahokia. Ancient earthworks cross the Midwest. Massive stone ruins in New England forests. Textbooks say these cultures were not technologically advanced, but what if that assumption is wrong? Theory 2. a global pre-industrial empire. Some researchers believe that North America was once part of a larger, advanced architectural civilization that connected Europe, Asia, and North America. Similar building styles appear across continents. Same domes, same arches, same column structures. Coincidence? Or remnants of the same culture? Theory 3. An older population replaced by settlers. It is possible that European settlers arrived to find partially ruined cities damaged by mudflood or disaster, and simply rebuilt on top of them, claiming credit. That would explain strange timelines, architectural inconsistencies, buried lower levels, massive structures appearing too suddenly in American history.
The Great Reset of the 1800s. Across the world, the 1800s were filled with strange events: fires in every major U.S. city, massive World's Fairs with temporary colossal buildings, destruction of old districts, resetting of city infrastructure, disappearance of old maps, sudden population booms, industrial revolutions that seemed to emerge from nowhere. Some people believe the 1800s represented a historical reboot, a deliberate rewriting of the past. Whether intentional or accidental, the outcome is the same. A lot of history is missing.
Why was history erased? If America once had older cities or structures, if there were civilizations here before the ones we know, why was it erased? There are several possible reasons. 1. Political motivation. A nation built on new beginnings doesn't want inconvenient old civilizations complicating its origin story. 2. Cultural simplification. It's easier to teach children a simple timeline than a complex one filled with mysteries. 3. Loss of knowledge. Disasters, natural or man-made, may have wiped out entire populations, leaving survivors unable to preserve the knowledge. 4. Narrative control. History is written by those who win, and those who win decide what parts of the past are worth remembering. What else are the ruins hiding? In the basements of old American buildings, in tunnels sealed by concrete, in forgotten underground chambers, researchers claim to have found strange symbols, room layouts that resemble ancient temples, giant doorframes, oversized arches, ventilation systems too advanced for the 1800s, brick types not produced in modern America, stone polishing techniques that resemble classical Europe, abandoned technologies. There are even reports of obelisks, hidden foundations, and entire city blocks buried under modern streets. Why would these exist in a country supposedly built from scratch?
The questions we're left with. Today's America skyline represents the future. But beneath that skyline, beneath the foundations of glass towers and steel giants, lies a forgotten world. A world of buried windows, submerged doorways, underground cities, mysterious tunnels, and architectural marvels older than the nation itself. The truth is simple. America is older than we think, much older. And the ruins beneath our cities are not just remnants of forgotten fires, floods, or accidents. They are the fingerprints of a history that was erased, a history we are only just beginning to rediscover.
The strange case of the 1890s building boom. In the last decade of the 19th century, something strange happened across the United States. Between 1880 and 1900, dozens of monumental buildings, cathedrals, city halls, museums, opera houses, libraries, and grand railway stations appeared seemingly overnight. The problem: these structures look like they required generations of skilled stonemasons, advanced architecture schools, sophisticated engineering, massive budgets, a cultural foundation of classical design. But America at that time had a young, scattered population, minimal infrastructure, no established architectural schools, limited industrial capability, and constant regional conflict. Yet we are expected to believe that within just 20 years, Americans built enough marble and granite landmarks to rival Europe, which had been building for centuries. Something doesn't align, because the sheer number of stone buildings completed in the 1990s alone seems nearly impossible given the documented workforce and resources. Some historians chalk it up to ambition. Others say it was the style of the time. But alternative researchers argue something else. These buildings weren't built. They were refurbished, repaired, modified, modernized, reclaimed, not created from scratch. And this theory becomes even more compelling when we examine the catastrophic fires of the late 1800s.
The mysterious Great Fires of America. One of the most overlooked patterns in U.S. history is the bizarre frequency of massive fires that destroyed entire cities within extremely short periods. Just consider the timeline. The Great Chicago Fire, 1871. The Great Boston Fire, 1872. The Great St. Louis Fire, 1849. The Great Baltimore Fire, 1904. The Great Seattle Fire, 1889. The Great Pittsburgh Fires, multiple between 1845 and 1877. The San Francisco Fires, nearly one every year between 1850 and 1900. These fires all share the same characteristics. They destroyed almost exclusively Old World architecture. They rarely touched newer wooden structures. They created an excuse for rebuilding. They cleared large areas in urban centers. They aligned perfectly with periods of population expansion and land reorganization. And here's the suspicious part. Many of these fires burned too hot and too fast for the materials involved. Newspapers at the time often described the flames as unnatural, unexplainable, or melting stone. That shouldn't be possible, unless the fires were not simply accidents, but events used, intentionally or unintentionally, to wipe away the last remnants of a forgotten civilization.
The World's Fairs, temporary or ancient? Perhaps the strangest element of America's rewritten history lies within the grand World's Fairs of the late 1800s and early 1900s. Take the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, for example. The fairgrounds included dozens of massive stone buildings, towers, domes, arches, multi-story halls, lakes, canals, a highly advanced electric system, citywide plumbing, giant statues. According to official history, these were temporary buildings made from a mixture of plaster and horsehair, and they were all supposedly built in 2 years. 2 years! But eyewitnesses at the time described the buildings as so solid that they believed they were permanent. Architects who visited the fair said the carvings, columns, and facades looked like they were made of real marble. Some buildings allegedly had foundations, steel framing, intricate stonework, and reinforced roofs.
None of that is needed for a temporary structure. And then something suspicious happened. After the fair ended, almost every building was destroyed, burned, demolished, erased. It was as if the purpose of the fair was not to showcase new construction, but to justify the existence of old monumental architecture so it could be conveniently removed. Other fairs across St. Louis, Buffalo, San Francisco, Seattle, New Orleans followed the exact same pattern. Gigantic, temporary cities built at impossible speed, then immediately destroyed. Or perhaps they were not built for the fair at all. They were reclaimed and then erased. A cultural reset disguised as entertainment.
The advanced technology that shouldn't exist. Dig deeper into 1800s America, and you'll find traces of an advanced technological understanding that simply shouldn't have existed in a nation barely emerging from a frontier lifestyle. For example, 1. Atmospheric electricity technologies. Old photographs show rooftop antennas, metal globes, tower-like rods, domed structures with conductive spires. What were they for? Some believe early American buildings were designed to harness natural atmospheric energy, similar to what Nikola Tesla later attempted. 2. Resonance chambers. Certain old structures contain extremely precise acoustics, far beyond what architects of the time are known to have understood. 3. Heating and cooling systems. Across several U.S. cities, researchers found massive underground air tunnels, steam channels, temperature-regulating chambers, and ventilation shafts carved into stone. Technology too advanced for the settlers credited with these constructions. 4. Giant doors and ceilings. Many public buildings from the 1800s feature doors that are 15 feet tall, ceilings reaching 30 or 40 feet high, windows so large that modern architects would consider them unnecessary. Were they built for people our size or for someone else? The scale doesn't match the society supposedly constructing them. Instead, it matches something older, something unknown. America's Lost Star Cities. Across the world, ancient civilizations constructed cities shaped like perfect stars. Geometric fortresses known today as star forts. They exist in Europe, Asia, Africa, South America, and strangely, dozens of them exist in North America. But here's the mystery. Most of the U.S. star forts were already present when Europeans arrived. Fort Wood, Fort McHenry, Fort Jackson, Castillo de San Marcos, Fort Constitution, Fort Pike, Fort Barrancas, Fort Barrancas. These were not simple military outposts. They are highly complex geometric structures that require mastery in advanced mathematics, hydrology, astronomy, masonry, urban planning. Yet textbooks claim they were built by small frontier militias with limited tools and almost no architectural knowledge. That explanation defies logic. The truth may be far stranger. These forts might be remnants of the same civilization responsible for the buried city layers and monumental architecture. A civilization wiped from the record. The cover-up through education. If this older civilization existed, why don't modern Americans know about it? Because history is often shaped by those with power. After the Civil War, the U.S. government standardized the education system. Almost overnight, new textbooks were mass-printed and distributed nationwide. These books replaced local historical records, simplified complex timelines, removed unexplained structures, created a linear, easy-to-teach narrative, downplayed indigenous achievements, presented America as a new land. Eyewitness accounts, diaries, and early maps that contradicted this new story were gradually removed from circulation. By the early 20th century, a completely new version of American history was taught everywhere. The older versions? Forgotten, discarded, locked away, lost in archives, sometimes intentionally destroyed. It was the perfect reset.
What does this mean for us today? If the official historical timeline is incomplete, if America sits on top of older, more advanced urban layers, if mysterious architecture and buried structures predate the nation, then the story of America is far more ancient, complex, and extraordinary than anyone imagined. It means there may have been an advanced civilization here long before the United States. Cataclysmic events reshaped the continent. Settlers may have inherited ruins rather than wilderness. History was rewritten for simplicity or for control. The ground beneath our feet hides more than we know. It means America's true origin story is still buried underground, waiting.
The pattern no one was supposed to notice. As we continue to peel back the layers of America's forgotten past, a pattern begins to emerge, one so consistent, so overwhelming that it becomes impossible to ignore. A pattern that suggests these ruins were not accidents of time, but clues left behind by a civilization whose fingerprints are still visible beneath the pavement of modern America. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The identical city blueprints. Take a map of San Francisco, overlay it on Chicago, then overlay both on Baltimore, Detroit, or St. Louis, and you'll notice something unsettling. These cities were designed using the same geometry, the same grid, the same placement of monumental civic buildings, all before modern urban planning even existed. Did architects from opposite sides of the country just happen to make the same choices? Or were they rebuilding on top of something that was already there? Because many of these cities share the same features: a grand central administrative building, gigantic Greco-Roman style structures far larger than the needs of a small 19th century town, massive domes and columns requiring engineering knowledge America didn't yet possess, and all of it supposedly built during a time when tens of thousands were dying from disease, poverty, and war. Something doesn't add up.
The suspicious timing of the Great Fires. Let's talk about the fires. America's biggest cities all suffered accidental fires within a very short historical window. The Great Chicago Fire of 1871, the Boston Fire of 1872, the Seattle Fire of 1889, the Baltimore Fire of 1904. But here's what's strange. Each fire destroyed almost identical architectural zones. Business districts filled with stone and brick buildings that should not have burned easily. Yet after each fire, the cities were cleared, rebuilt, modernized, and the old structures disappeared forever. It's almost as if these disasters came at the perfect time, just when America was beginning to industrialize and rewrite its own history. Were these fires truly accidents, or were they convenient resets?
What the old photos actually show. Look closely at 19th century photographs of American cities, images taken long before Photoshop, long before digital manipulation. What you see is shocking. Enormous domed buildings towering over dirt streets, cathedrals and courthouses with impossibly intricate stonework, entire city blocks of monumental architecture, even when the population was tiny. And yet, almost no evidence of construction. Where are the cranes? Where are the workers? Where are the materials? Instead, the photos show the opposite. The buildings look aged, weathered, and worn, as if they had been there much longer than officially claimed. This is the part of history that textbooks never address.
Who built these cities first? When you put the pieces together, a possibility emerges that challenges everything we've been told. What if early Americans didn't build these cities from scratch, but inherited the remains of a much older civilization? A civilization advanced enough to create sophisticated stone architecture, large-scale infrastructure, acoustic engineering, perfect city grids, and massive public buildings that even today would be challenging to construct. If such a civilization existed, its ruins would look exactly like the structures we see in America's oldest cities. Ruins that were later reused, repainted, repurposed, and eventually claimed as American originals. The erased layer of American history. Every time a historian hits a dead end, the same phrase appears. The origins of this building are unclear. The original architect is unknown. Construction records have been lost. How convenient. It's as if there was a chapter of history that someone decided we didn't need to know. But ruins don't lie. Architecture doesn't lie. Patterns don't lie. And the ruins buried beneath American cities are whispering a story of an erased civilization, a story waiting to be uncovered.
The underground America we were never meant to locate. If the ruined buildings on the surface raise questions, what lies beneath America's cities opens an entirely new mystery. Because the deeper we go, the more obvious it becomes. A whole layer of the United States is built on top of something older, something advanced, something almost completely erased. Let's descend beneath the streets and uncover what the ground has been hiding for over a century. The hidden underground levels. In city after city, the same strange feature appears. Buried doors, half-submerged windows, entire floors hidden under modern street level. You'll find them in Seattle's underground city, New York's sunken building facades, Portland's mysterious underground tunnels, St. Louis's buried stone arches, Chicago's forgotten sub-basements. Why would 19th century settlers struggling for food, fighting disease, and lacking industry build massive structures with underground floors? Why would they construct windows below the ground where no light could ever reach? The official explanation is street raising. But that explanation collapses the moment you notice that the architecture looks older than the cities themselves. It's not that the streets were raised, it's that the buildings were already there. Americans didn't build over these levels by accident. They inherited them. The technology that shouldn't exist in the 1800s. Inside these buried levels, researchers have found advanced stone masonry with precision cuts, ventilation systems far more complex than 19th century engineering, arched ceilings and massive pillars carved from single blocks, geometric symmetry that required mathematical precision. All this supposedly built in a time when there were no modern cranes, no electric tools, no large construction companies, no mass industrial base. Yet, the workmanship rivals European architecture from the Renaissance, and in some cases surpasses it.
So, who built these structures? And why were they buried? The exposition puzzle, the reset moment. Now we reach the most suspicious chapter of all, the World's Fairs, especially the Chicago Columbian Exposition of 1893. According to official history, these massive white cities, some the size of modern downtowns, were built in less than 2 years using small crews, primitive tools, horse-drawn wagons, and limited industry. Then, after the fairs ended, these architectural masterpieces were immediately destroyed. Why? Because the official story doesn't hold up. Many researchers believe the fairs weren't showcasing newly built structures. They were displaying the remains of an older civilization, refurbished with plaster and then demolished to hide the evidence. A one-time chance to show Americans a forgotten world and then erase it forever.
The cities that shouldn't exist. By now, the pattern becomes undeniable. Identical city layouts, monumental architecture far too advanced, massive fires wiping the slate clean, underground levels revealing older construction, World's Fairs acting as the perfect cover for demolition, missing construction records everywhere. It paints a picture not of accidental loss, but of intentional erasure, as if someone wanted a reset, a fresh start, a new narrative for a new nation. And the old world? Buried, burned, erased.
The final question: what really came before? This is where our journey leads us. If America inherited cities rather than built them, then who were the original builders? Were they an advanced civilization that disappeared long before our textbooks begin? A civilization with superior engineering, mathematical knowledge, monumental stone architecture, and a presence across the entire continent. Everything we've uncovered hints at a forgotten chapter, a civilization wiped from the record, its ruins hiding in plain sight beneath America's busiest streets. And maybe, just maybe, the history we've been taught is only the surface layer of a much deeper, far older story. A story waiting for someone brave enough to uncover it. Ending. The story closes. The mystery remains. So the next time you walk through a major U.S. city, look carefully at the half-buried windows, at the impossible stonework, at the grand structures with no origin. Because beneath every step, beneath every street, beneath every skyscraper, lies a forgotten world, a world erased, a world whose ruins still whisper the truth that history didn't begin with us. It began with someone else. Someone we were never meant to know.